Listen, if you find yourself watching what's happening with the war in Iran and thinking you may need to reposition your life, that's not necessarily an overreaction. At some point, it comes down to this: what's actually happening and what do you do about it? Not because your mindset alone will fix everything, but because neither panic nor overwhelm the strategies. The most useful thing that you have control over right now is how clearly you can think, and then what you'll actually do with that understanding. If you're considering a move to the Caribbean and now feel more overwhelmed than ever, this is the point where you need to get specific. In this video, I'm going to outline what's actually happening, how it's likely to impact Caribbean islands, and what you need to think about if you're considering a move in this context. And I get the feeling I'm speaking to a particular person in this video. I'm feeling you're not necessarily someone looking to make the leap to the Caribbean because you want to lie back on a beach and drink margaritas. I think you're someone that's looking to move in an intentional way and that you're open to things like growing food, being a bit more self reliant, or maybe you already have some kind of foothold here, whether that be family, land, or connections, or otherwise. But before we dive deeper, I'm Zoe Smith, founder of the Exodus Collective, a community for people thinking seriously about how to live in the Caribbean in ways that are actually viable. What I'm going to share here is a high level version of the kind of thinking that I go through with my clients one to one. If you need specific advice applied to your situation, do book a call. But in this video, I'll help you determine whether this is something you actually need to act on or not. So, what's actually happening? Let's zoom out for a second. What we're looking at right now isn't one issue. It's what's known as a polycrisis. That's multiple systems under pressure at the same time: energy, shipping, fertilizer, food production. And the Caribbean sits in a very particular position within that. Most islands are heavily import dependent. So when those systems tighten even slightly, it shows up here pretty quickly in higher food prices, less availability, more volatility, and importantly, less predictability. And this is where I need to be very clear. Moving to the Caribbean doesn't necessarily solve any of this. In some cases, it could make things more fragile, not less. If you arrive in a way or in a place where you're still fully dependent on imported food, imported fuel, imported goods, then you may end up relocating the problem without actually solving it. However, what can change your position is very specific, and this is where many people haven't thought through things properly before I start working with them. There are a few key questions that it really helps you to be as clear on as possible. Firstly, why are you moving? Now, this sounds obvious, but it's usually not. Most people I speak to know something needs to change. The ones who move well are usually the ones who've gotten really specific about what they're actually solving, because that determines everything that comes after. And in a time like this, where there's more uncertainty, not less, it really helps if your why is very clear. Are you moving for lifestyle, cost of living, proximity to family, or because you're trying to reduce your exposure to systems that feel increasingly unstable? Each one of those are very different starting points, and they lead to very different decisions. Because if what you're looking for includes resilience, then what you prioritize will not look like a holiday version of the Caribbean. The second question is whether you have access to land. You don't necessarily need a lot, but enough to produce something meaningful is advisable. A half an acre used properly can materially shift your food position. Now, you may wonder why I'm asking this, but the way things are looking, I don't think it's smart to bank on the supermarket always being your main source of food. If you've been paying attention to what's happening with shipping routes, fertilizer costs, or even your grocery bill over the past few weeks, you know this isn't theoretical. Because the question isn't whether disruption is coming, it's now understanding the degree to which your position and that of those who surround you is dependent on systems that are already showing cracks. In that context, access to land that produces food isn't about lifestyle, it's leverage. Third question is, can that land actually produce? Now, this is where people often get caught out. Slope, soil, water, access. All of that matters. Not all land is usable in the way people imagine, even if Caribbean islands like to boast about the fertility of their soils. Thirdly, what is your realistic level of provisioning? I'm not necessarily talking about going into full prepper mode or living off grid, but knowing if you can grow your staples. Can you reduce reliance? Can you stabilize part of your food supply? Because even 20 to 30% of a reduction makes a difference. And for the folks sitting on family land, this is probably the moment to look at that a little differently. Not sentimentally, but practically. And I know often these conversations, especially amongst family members, are not easy. But instead of jumping straight into legal mode, perhaps you could start by getting clear on a few things like, what is this land that we've all been talking about? Where is it? What could it actually support? Because unused land in this context is something that has potential that could really be activated. So once you've reflected on all of that, this is a point where many people get stuck, not because you don't care, but because you're trying to figure out all of this stuff in your head in isolation. In fact, often in the context of people who think you're absolutely crazy to even be thinking this way. And the reality is that there are a ton of variables to consider. And that's exactly why I started doing one on one sessions with clients. Because what people need at this point isn't more content, it's clarity on their unique situation. What you need is a realistic assessment and a path that actually makes sense for you and where you want to get to. So if you're watching this and thinking, I need to take this seriously, but I don't know how to approach it, that's what my one on one sessions are for. You'll leave our call with a clear yes, no, or next step. And that alone is worth more than months of going back and forth in your head. And so the reason for this video is that I'm only offering calls up until April 30th. After that, I'm closing these sessions to focus on the next phase of my Grenada project because I'm following my own advice and I'm adjusting for uncertainty. I'm writing a book, building an app, and most importantly, starting to do the actual work on the ground. So if you want to sit down and look at your situation properly, the link is in the description below. And I look forward to connecting with you all on your journey and wish you well.